The Lib Dems claim an historic victory in the Richmond Park by-election. They say it's a rejection of Brexit and that the tide is turning in their direction.
The people of Richmond Park yesterday voted to send a message to Theresa May that the British people did not vote for a hard Brexit.
Also tonight, a former Chelsea star says the club paid him thousands to stay quiet about being abused.
Despite delays, overcrowding and strikes, rail fares will rise far faster than inflation.
I know nothing.
Andrew Sachs, best known as Manuel in Fawlty Towers, has died. Tributes from family and friends.
Definitely not this sort of little mad, extroverted little Spaniard. And they put the moustache on him and he just changed.
Berg's Formula One shock, he retires days after winning the World Championship.
This is the ITV Evening News with Alistair Stewart and Charlene White.
Good evening. The Lib Dems today heralded their shock by-election victory as historic, and one that could put the party back on the political map. They say the huge swing from the Tories to them in Richmond Park was a Brexit backlash against Theresa May.
Ministers, though, said nothing could be read into a single result and insisted it wouldn't change the government's commitment to leave the EU. But it was quite a turnaround. In 2015, Conservative Zac Goldsmith beat the Lib Dems with a 23,000 majority. Last night, all that changed with Goldsmith, who stood as an independent, trounced by the Lib Dems, who now have a 1,900 majority. Here's our political correspondent Paul Brand on another electoral upset.
Good morning for you, Mr Farron. A good morning for you.
All right. It's a good morning. Start of many more.
That might sound a little optimistic, but after finding themselves on the wrong side of the big Brexit vote, this morning the Lib Dems were celebrating victory in their own mini-referendum.
The people of Richmond Park yesterday voted to send a message to Theresa May that the British people did not vote for a hard Brexit that will damage our economy and future generations and our standing in the world.
Sarah Olney will now carry that message to Parliament, one extra MP to add to the party's other 8.
Is the Prime Minister really going to listen to you when you've still only got 9 MPs?
It's about listening to the electorate. Now, what's happened at the moment is that the Tory party's main opposition has come for its own right flank. What the Liberal Democrats have shown is that out in the country that we have the ability to form that kind of moderate, progressive opposition.
Liberal Democrats, 20,000.
Last night, the Lib Dems overturned a 23,000 majority held by this man. Zac Goldsmith quit the Tories to stand as an independent, having always promised a by-election if Heathrow Airport was expanded.
It was a promise that I made, and it was a promise that I kept.
Tonight, that promise might be a regret after the by-election quickly became about Brexit. 70% here voted to remain, but he backed leaving, while she certainly didn't.
Is it your intention to try and block Brexit in Parliament?
Well, I've been very clear in this campaign that if a vote on Article 50 comes before Parliament, then I will vote against invoking it, and I've been sent back to Parliament with a very clear mandate to do just that.
But Brexiteers aren't panicking yet.
I think you can read nothing into a single by-election. If I've learned anything in my 20-odd years in Parliament, it's that by-elections are all very independent. What you can read into is the fact that in the referendum 17 million people voted to leave the European Union, and that's the instruction they've given their government.
But we found plenty of Richmond voters who deliberately sent a different message.
It's the Remainers here having a chance to say, actually, we chose to remain, please listen to us.
A lot of people like me who are traditional Conservative voters that have swung over to the Liberals just because of this one campaign.
People have spoken in the referendum. What will another protest vote do?
We'll have to see whether the excitement of one by-election ends up being lost in the bigger picture.
Paul, no word yet from number 10, but will the Prime Minister be worried by this result?
Well, Alistair, if the Lib Dems were going to win anywhere, it was going to be Richmond, one of the most wealthy seats in country, one of the largest Remain votes in the UK. So I think this is more distraction than disaster for Theresa May. I don't think it puts a huge amount of pressure on her just to soften up Brexit that little bit more. The Lib Dems, though, move on to Sleaford and North Hykeham now, where there'll be another by-election next week. Now, that seat in Lincolnshire is a very different kettle of fish. A majority there voted to leave the EU. If the Conservatives have a bad night in that by-election, then I think we are into different territory, where all that talk of an early election certainly starts to sound fairly foolish. I think one thing Richmond does tell us, though, that all these usual divides of left and right have been replaced by one big question now in politics. Are you for Brexit or against it?
Paul, thank you.
Chelsea Football Club has insisted that a £50,000 payment to a former player who was sexually abused wasn't hush money.
Gary Johnson claims that he was told to keep quiet after telling the club of allegations against a football scout. Chelsea, they say, it was compensation, as Juliette Bremner now reports.
He is the latest man to speak out about the abuse he suffered as a young footballer. Gary Johnson claims he was paid by his former club Chelsea to stop him revealing details of that abuse.
For them to pay the money that they paid with an order tells you that, you know, they really didn't want to admit or help myself for fear of being exposed.
He made several first-team appearances, but claims between the ages of 13 and 17 he was repeatedly abused by the former youth coach Eddie Heath, who has since died. At a press conference today, Chelsea faced questions about why Gary Johnson had been paid £50,000 and his claims kept secret.
As I understand it, there is a duty on all clubs, if child sexual abuse is reported to them, to take those matters to either the FA or to the Football League. This doesn't appear to have been done.
I'm not going to comment on that. I'm not going to comment on the aspects of the case. I think it's only right and proper that we conduct our own investigation, aided by external solicitors.
Football fans have been reassured that the game has changed, but these allegations emerged just 2 years ago.
Gary Johnson claims that he only came to Chelsea after he tried and failed to alert both the Metropolitan Police and the Players' Union, the PFA. He alleges that he went to Operation Newtree, specially set up by the police in the wake of the Savile scandal. But they told him he'd be better off coming back to his old club.
The police wiped their hands, it's PFA to a degree. Yeah. Who's this guy? You know, not a name. Yeah. That's what it felt like.
If you're a young boy or girl and you're upset, hurt or scared.
Ahead of this weekend's fixtures, the England football captain heads an FA campaign to keep children safe. But to many, this will seem too little, too late. Juliette Bremner, ITV News.
Transport campaigners say the latest rail fare increases will price people off the railways. From January, they'll rise by an average of 2.3%, but some routes will see fares go up by almost 5%. Our consumer editor, Chris Troy, is at Birmingham New Street Station for us tonight. Chris, this could be quite tough to take for some passengers, couldn't it?
Well, yes, you know how it is. Passengers are used to delays, but one thing that always arrives on time is the fare rise. Let me take you through the details. On average, rail fares will rise 2.3% in January, but some passengers will face far bigger increases. For example, a London-Newcastle anytime return will be up 5% to £292. A similar ticket between Birmingham and Edinburgh rises 3.9% to £224.70. And one of the biggest rail services in the whole country, Virgin Trains East Coast, is increasing prices by 4.9% across the board on average. And you know, even here in Birmingham, where they have spent £750 million on improvements, passengers are angry.
Underinvestment, you know, not enough sort of profits actually being ploughed back into the services.
Do you think the train journeys that you have are worth paying extra money for in the new year?
Not really, because there's never enough carriages. It's always really fully packed and no one can sit down, you have to stand up.
Now, we've heard there from passengers, but what about the rail firms themselves, Chris?
Well, the industry tonight is insisting that there's light at the end of the tunnel, and it is an oncoming improved train. Here's their spokesperson.
It's really important that we take the money from the fares increase, which are regulated by government, to invest back into the rail network.
Surely passengers should only have to pay more if performance is improving, and it's not.
We are putting as much as we possibly can back into the rail network to improve the experience for passengers.
Well, they can be specific about when these rises come in, January the 2nd, far less precise about when we, passengers, will see the improvements they reckon this new income will help purchase.
OK, Chris, thanks very much. And you can find out how much your ticket will go up by on our website. The address, of course, is itv.com/news.
President-elect Donald Trump has appointed a retired general known as Mad Dog as the new head of America's armed forces. But James Mattis, as he's properly known, may prove a surprise. He's seen as an intellectual who has the weight to curb some of Mr. Trump's more outlandish ideas, although perhaps not over Iran. Our Washington correspondent Robert Moore explains.
For the first time since his shock victory, Donald Trump was back on the campaign trail, calling it a thank you tour of Middle America. But this being Trump, more impresario than president-elect, he had a surprise at his rally.
I don't want to tell you this because I want to save the suspense for next week.
At stake, who would lead the Pentagon and be one of the key voices in his new administration?
We are going to appoint Mad Dog Mattis as our Secretary of Defense.
Mad Dog is just one of the nicknames for this former Marine general. He is also known as the Warrior Monk. He famously led the race by US troops into Baghdad, an impressive, hard-charging military leader, but who has also courted controversy with comments about warfare, including this one about fighting the Taliban.
Actually, it's a lot of fun to fight them, you know. It's a hell of a hoot. It's fun to shoot some people. I'll be right up on you. I like brawling.
Mattis will now be at the forefront of the fight against ISIS in the coming years, possibly collaborating with Russia in Syria. And like his new boss, the former general is regarded as a hardliner on Iran. He called the government in Tehran the most enduring threat to stability in the Middle East. Trump was last night reveling in being the campaigner once more. For a final time, his supporters demanding Hillary Clinton be locked up. The president-elect is making cabinet announcements in the most theatrical way.
I refuse to tell, and don't let it outside of this room. Do you promise? Raise your hand.
Americans left to wonder now how exactly he will govern. Robert Moore, ITV News, Washington.
Well, Europe itself is bracing for its own political shocks this weekend. If the Italian government loses a crunch referendum, there are fears of more instability. But there could be worse in Austria, where Europe's first far-right leader since the Second World War could be voted into power. From Vienna, here's our Europe editor, James Mates.
A gilded hall, choir singing gently under a Christmas tree beside the Advent candles. The far right these days are not all beer cellars and open-air rallies. One look at this well-heeled, all-white audience suggests that what was once extreme is becoming respectable, even normal. After all that's happened in 2016, it seems almost unremarkable that this man, Norbert Hofer, may be on the verge of becoming Europe's first far-right head of state to be elected since the war.
Europe's establishment is still wondering when this rising tide of populism is going to reach its high watermark. They make no secret of the fact that on Sunday they would like to see Norbert Hofer lose and the Italian government win its referendum. They may be in for a double disappointment.
Not least because after the unexpected wins for Brexit and then for Donald Trump, those who were once considered protest voters suddenly start believing their man can actually win. He himself acknowledged, though, it's going to be extremely close.
How do you rate your chances this time?
I think it's 50-50. We'll see.
Has Brexit and Trump made it harder for you or easier?
I think the people in Austria, they have to decide for whom they will vote. It's not so important who is the president of the state, or the Brexit is not so important.
Das letzte Duell vor der Stichwahl. Norbert Hofer und Alexander van der Bellen.
He and his opponent, debating last night, are competing for a largely ceremonial job. But by next year, many think Hofer's Freedom Party could be in full control in Austria.
I think the likelihood of the Freedom Party being in government is very, very high, regardless.
Whether he wins or not.
Yes.
That's the way things are moving in Austria.
Yes.
And not just in Austria. By Sunday night, the election of President Hofer may have become the latest political shock to hit Europe, but perhaps not the last. James Mates, ITV News, Vienna.
Here, the Chief Constable of Wiltshire Police has defended his force's handling of child sex allegations against the former Prime Minister Sir Edward Heath. In an open letter, Mike Veal said the investigation is complex and insisted it's not a fishing trip or a witch hunt.
And the liquidator of BHS has told ITV News he'll examine whether Sir Philip Green should get back a £35 million debt owed by the business. Well, you can read Joel Hill's full blog on this development on our website, itv.com/news.
John Cleese tonight paid tribute to his Fawlty Towers co-star Andrew Sachs, describing him as a gentleman who was wicked fun. Sachs, who famously played hapless Spanish waiter Manuel, has died, aged 86.
At the end of his life, the actor was suffering from dementia, and his son told ITV News about the impact that had on his family. Paul Davis looks back at the comedian's career.
I specifically asked for a sea view in my written confirmation, so please make sure I have it.
Okay.
What?
He didn't have many lines, but they were memorable. As Manuel, the hapless waiter, endlessly at odds with his boss Basil Fawlty, Andrew Sachs delivered some of British comedy's favourite catchlines.
I know nothing. What? I know nothing.
His contribution to comedy gold, fondly remembered by his co-star today, talking from Dallas.
Well, he was always thoughtful, Andy. He was a quiet person, but good fun, with a slightly wicked but very quiet sense of humour, but definitely not this sort of little mad, extroverted little Spaniard. And they put the moustache on him, and he just changed personality. It was extraordinary.
Sachs was born in Berlin in 1930. His Jewish family fled to Britain to escape persecution. His stage career included parts in some of the best-known farces, here alongside Barbara Windsor. But in 1975, he landed the TV role that would define his career.
Really, Andre, he's wonderful.
This Basil's wife. This Basil. This smack on head.
Ironically, Sachs appeared unaware of his own popularity. His son says he didn't expect to be kept on for the second series of Fawlty Towers.
A typical actor, totally insecure, didn't think it was going to be necessary to put a waiter in the second series, you know.
John Cleese had other ideas.
This was one playing off the other. You can't have Laurel without Hardy.
After Fawlty Towers, there was an appearance in Coronation Street.
Well, Norris, I'm sorry me turning up like this is upsetting you so much.
He was also unwittingly caught up in real-life broadcast drama. Comedian Russell Brand forced to resign from the BBC after leaving lewd messages on Sachs' answer phone relating to his granddaughter. Andrew Sachs was diagnosed with dementia in 2012. Tragically, because of his condition, by the end he no longer recognised episodes of Fawlty Towers shown to him at his care home.
They're always trying to stimulate you mentally, physically, any which way they can. And they felt that if they put that on, he would actually kind of get some kind of memory back. And sadly, it didn't work.
The family take consolation in the sure knowledge that future generations will still be laughing at these iconic scenes.
Not you! I quit! Get out! I on strike! I'm warning you! I stay here, it's nice!
Tributes to Andrew Sachs, who's died aged 86.
Just 5 days after finally getting the better of Lewis Hamilton and winning his first Formula One World Championship, Nico Rosberg has surprised everyone by announcing his retirement. In a Facebook post, the German said he'd climbed his mountain and wanted to go out at the peak. Our sports correspondent, Ian Payne.
It's a very special day today, of course, as you know, to receive the trophy this evening.
Nico Rosberg was in Vienna today to collect his trophy for becoming the Formula One World Champion. As he was doing so, he released this online.
This year, you know, it's been extremely tough as well. I really gave it everything I had. I didn't leave a stone unturned, and I'm not willing to do that again for next year. And so I've decided to call it a day.
Having won the 2016 title. Last Sunday evening, Rosberg celebrated with donuts as he achieved his lifetime's ambition, 34 years after his father had done it by winning the world title. He says he made the decision on Monday evening, told his family and the Mercedes team, and added more detail for his decision at today's awards ceremony.
My wife Vivian is also very, very excited. She'll have a husband back, and I'll be a dad again then in the next time, which is going to be wonderful.
Rosberg's rivalry with his teammate Lewis Hamilton has provided one of the few competitive aspects of the sport recently. Mercedes say they were surprised by the news. Hamilton said he wasn't, but that Formula One would miss him. But such has been Mercedes' dominance. Whoever succeeds Rosberg is sure to be one of the favourites for next year. Ian Payne, ITV News.
And finally tonight, the touching thank you notes that moved one doctor to tears. 10-year-old Elle Grace Morris has cystic fibrosis, and she was told she probably wouldn't survive the year, let alone see another Christmas.
But Elle's beaten the odds and says that's mostly due to Dr. Ravi Jarayan. And when she went to thank him in person, it prompted an emotional reaction, as Damon Green reports.
Elle goes to school every day and does most of the things that a 10-year-old likes to do. But since the age of 1, she's been treated for cystic fibrosis and has spent much of her childhood in and out of hospital. Now, she needs a lung transplant, but being a cheerful girl, is quite looking forward to it.
It would be exciting knowing that I can do stuff that other people can do, and scary that I'm having a big operation. This time last year, I told you that all I wanted for Christmas was a new pair of lungs.
Elle was chosen by the Cystic Fibrosis Trust to make a video to appeal for donors and to thank the staff at the hospitals in Cheshire where she's treated. Dr. Ravi has looked after her at the Countess of Chester since she was 1 year old. Now, 9 years later, the little girl and the consultant are great friends.
When I'm poorly in hospital, he always tries to make me laugh. And he always tries to make funny jokes, and sometimes they're not funny.
Part of the film meant the doctor reading a card she'd written to him, and when he did, his reaction took everyone by surprise.
So that's why I'm writing you this thank you letter for being my stars. Without your help, I don't
know if I'd be here today. Thank you.
Come here.
And then I got to the last bit and I was just completely overwhelmed. To get words like that from a 10-year-old girl is just beyond anything, and it really reminds you when it happens just why we get up in the morning and come to work.
Elle will carry on doing her best, coping every day, and the people who love her and care for her will carry on doing just that. Damon Green, ITV News, in Cheshire.
And that is it for now. Tom Bradby will be here with news at 10.
But from all of the team here, have a very good evening. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.